You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Coomer. I am the chair of the Board of Directors of the Atlantic Yards Community Development Corporation. Unfortunately, I'm not able at this time to call the meeting that we had originally planned for today to order because we have unfortunately lost our ability to have a quorum. However, in an informal discussion, the board has agreed that we would like to proceed with the informational portion of the meeting as it had been planned. We won't be able to do anything at this meeting that requires a vote, and that includes items on the agenda that include the approval of the minutes of the last meeting, nor will we be able to discuss or approve a budget for fiscal year 24-25. That will have to wait for a meeting that will hopefully be rescheduled soon where we have a quorum. So we're going to do, since people are here, lots of people have taken time out of their day and week to attend this meeting. We're going to do whatever we can do that doesn't require a vote. I'm going to first address an issue that was raised and is reflected at pages, I think, 14 through 16 of the minutes from last meeting, in which Director Vicconi made a suggestion that we explore the formation of a committee of the board to conduct more informal discussions and sort of brainstorming sessions to consider the current situation involving the overall project and get the perspectives of members in a less formal setting. And we agreed at that time that we were going to explore the legal issues around that, specifically under the open meetings law. Since that time, I have conducted my own legal research, and ESD staff have also done legal analysis of the issue. And unfortunately, we've determined that we can't do it in the way that was suggested at the last meeting, without potentially running afoul of the open meetings law. And I want to say that I appreciate the prudent and conservative approach that's been taken by ESD staff on this issue. The last thing we need is to have this body distracted by, members having to sit for depositions in a lawsuit or something like that, as a result of good faith efforts to move the ball forward on our discussions. But and I also, as a general matter, strongly believe, as I'm speaking personally here, that the open meetings law serves a very important purpose of ensuring transparency in government. That said, and again, I'm expressing my personal view on this, I think that its application in this context, and it's sort of in the strict interpretation that's being brought to bear, has the potential to inhibit and perhaps even fully stymie the ability of a body like this, an advisory body like this, to carry out its chartered function effectively. We are an advisory body. We're appointed by different governmental actors. We come to this this body with diverse views and diverse experiences, and I think the purpose of our being would be greatly served by the ability to have less formal and more candid discussions that we could then bring the fruits of to a public meeting that would be fully transparent. So the bottom line is that I intend to continue discussions with ESD staff about other possible compliant solutions that would achieve the result we're all seeking, and that could include possibly consultation with the Committee on Open Government and perhaps even pursuit of legislative clarification. Again, expressing my personal view on this, and I guess the most I can say at this point is just stay tuned on the issue. We certainly we have no intention to circumvent the lawful, guidelines of the open meetings law, but we want to still see if we can try to achieve the result that Gibb suggested at the last meeting very prudently. So that's all I'll say at this point on that issue. I think we can turn to Anna to give the update that was planned, and I think we will be able to have discussion, questions, that sort of thing, including any public comments that people want to make. The public who is in attendance at this meeting just needs to understand that board members will not be able to offer any resolutions or motions or anything like that at this meeting. They'll have to wait for another meeting. Go ahead, Anna.
All right. Thank you very much. Anna Picior from Empire State Development. Good to see you all again. I will move to slides for informational purposes. All right. So, an update on housing information for the board as an informational purposes only. So to date, 3,200 units have been built under the Atlantic Yards project, of which nearly 1,400 are affordable, with affordability levels set throughout the course of the project. As you see in the slide here, the 2005 MOU was a non-binding agreement signed between the then developer, Forest City Ratner, and Acorn. This document said, and I'll quote, the developer should desire to building 2,250 units of the residential project as affordable to households, which was 50% of the total 4,500 expected units at that time. Since then, we have affirmed the 2014 Atlantic Yards project agreement between ESD and Brooklyn Speaks. This agreement stipulated that there must be a minimum of 35% affordable units completed at any stage of construction until the project's completion or until a total of 2,250 affordable units have been completed. I should add, once a total of 1,050 affordable units have been built, the minimum percentage of the affordable units dropped to 25%, which is noted in the bottom of the slide. This is the first piece of a two-part informational update on the housing.
Early on, I had asked if there was a breakdown by income levels of the bands.
And we have that on the next slide. Yep. Any questions on this one?
So far, so good.
Okay. All right. Affordable housing analysis for informational purposes. So our analysis shows that the current project is currently meeting the 35% unit construction requirement from the 2014 agreement. We're still working to meet a goal of the minimum of 2,250 affordable units by the end of phase 2. You'll see in the top chart on this slide, it shows the completed buildings broken down by building. And we can see from here, 43% of the units in the buildings that have been built are, in fact, affordable units. When trying to understand how the income distribution came about in the table beneath us, it is important to keep in mind that you'll see the HPD financing yes or no question. Those which were not HPD financing were in fact 421A financing. And it's important to keep in mind that at the time that these units were being financed, The units were in compliance with the then AMIs provided for under HPD term sheets as well as 421A guidelines. Give people, there's a lot of information on the slide.
There is, and also, is it really close?
You can walk up to.
Yes,
It is. And
I'm
we
gonna
used to be able to use, we used to have
yes.
those
Used to have
slides.
two screens.
Okay.
Just
Yes,
like
and
for
I will note 2 screens again.
Yeah.
By all means.
Yes, and the microphones reach all the way down, so.
Send that to us too?
Yep, I don't know how it turns.
Oh, I don't know how the informational,
We have to check on the.
Since this is not
Since
like
it's
an
being
official meeting.
streamed and it's
Okay.
open to the public right
Awesome.
now, then we can just
We
give
good?
it to the
Okay.
directors.
okay, thank you.
Then yes.
Yep, we will send it to you as well.
We just know, yeah.
I don't know if there's another slide after this on
Not
the
on this stuff.
No, I'm not housing
subject,
this.
but I would make the point that the skew here to the middle income bands it compares unfavorably to the commitments in the 2005 Affordable Housing MOU, which envisioned more of a distribution towards the lower to income bands below that. And anecdotally, I will say at various points during the history of this project, members of the development team have commented that the difference could be made up at the end and more affordable, deeper affordability could be introduced at the end. But it's not clear there's an opportunity to do that today under the current subsidies that are available. So I think one of the things that we should be concerned about is how the project can deliver more deeply affordable apartments, which are the ones that are the most desperately needed in this part of Brooklyn, a part that has seen significant displacement of lower income people since the time the project was announced.
We are open to exploring ways to see that the future units are more affordable in future phases of the project, and we understand it's a priority of the board.
I think it's an understatement to say that most of it isn't. About a third is above the AMI, 100%. Between 100% and 160%, if I'm correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's another
32% is above 101 to 165% of the AMI.
I will say HPD at the time had term sheets for units ranging up to 130% AMI, and at the time 421A was up to 165%
I
AMI.
know, but the agreement was that it be skewed, it not be skewed in one direction, and this is skewed to the middle and upper income.
Yeah, and I think, looking back at the MOU and really more specifically the CBA, there was language about the developer and Acorn working together to achieve the ideal, 50-50 market rate and affordable unit mix with those affordability levels and there's an appendix that has the different levels of affordability in the MOU. And it talks about having to go
see them side by side.
I think this is kind of they're not so apples to apples. It's a little complicated, but regardless of that, there's language that talks about, the developer with Acorn going and finding out what subsidies available, how the costs are, basically how they could get the deals to be as close to that metric as possible. And there's language that says if it can't be exactly like this MOU, they want developer and Acorn to work together to get it to as close as possible. So what we could only assume, since we weren't, at the table there at the time, is that what we're seeing here were the results of the developer and Acorn working with, at that point, the city's housing agency, who's providing subsidy for these projects to get to these affordability levels. But again, we weren't there, so it's just an assumption. But looking back at the documents, that was how the process was laid out.
I mean, I think in retrospect, probably at least some of us would agree that having something as important as the affordability levels of the affordable housing being negotiated in a private agreement at the beginning of the project wasn't ideal. And especially when the definitive agreement that was made in 2009 set a much higher AMI, between the state and the developers, set a much higher maximum AMI for the definition of affordable housing. So those things have been done. The result, I think, has not been what the public perhaps expected at the time the project was announced, nor what the public needs today. And again, I think we should really work towards solutions that create a larger percentage of deeply affordable apartments in the remaining 877 affordable units that have to be delivered. The other thing I guess I would note is that the community preference for this project also was negotiated as part of the 421A agreement, I think, that was done in 2009 and inspired in 2016, and that provided a 50% preference for community districts 2, 3, 6, and 8, which hasn't existed since 2016. So today there's actually no community preference for affordable housing at Atlantic Yards at all, not even the 20% that the Adams administration has negotiated as a function of the fair housing suit they recently settled, or the 15% that it will turn into in 2029. There's 0% now at Atlantic Yards. So I think we should.
But do we have any data as to in the units that have already been built and how they were distributed amongst the districts?
In terms of preference?
Yeah.
I'm sure that HPD would have that information because these went through the Housing Connect lottery.
I see.
I haven't seen it myself.
It'd be helpful to see.
But any units that would have been subject to preference would have been built, would have been offered before 2016.
Before 2016.
So since then, for instance, in the
I can't see the dates. There's a column there
Before
with dates.
2016. So Site 2, which is 461 Dean, that was 2012. Site 3, or Lot B3, excuse me, which is 38 6th Avenue, that was 2015. And
probably
we have 535 is 2014.
Would have been in there too. Yeah. So the ones that came later, like B15, like
13 certainly.
12 and 13. Yeah, 12 and 13 had kind of the double whammy of not having preference and also getting subsidized under 421A option C, which is 130% AMI. It sort of reminds me of the old Woody Allen joke about the restaurant where the food isn't very good and the portions are small.
Yes. Okay. Are there any further questions at this time on this data? I think we will all want to chew on it, and you'll obviously at the next meeting where we have a quorum, we can revisit some of this data if people have follow-up questions.
And we will send it.
Yeah, please. While the numbers obviously have, while there's been some negative reaction to the numbers, I do want to thank the ESD staff for pulling this together. It's been very helpful to see it in.
Since it's not an official meeting,
yes,
it doesn't matter if it's out of order.
Yes, it doesn't matter.
Share the screen so that we can have a full ring on the webcast.
We have another. There's nothing on the other side.
Oh, there's nothing. It's just a title.
Okay.
I can unshare.
Go ahead, Rob.
I'm just wondering whether Carol's letter isn't appropriate at this point in time, where we have 870 units left. And he talked about that 870 plus in his letter.
Okay, do you want to, Ron is referring to a letter, a comment we received from Assembly Member Robert Carroll that was distributed to the committee. Do you want to briefly summarize?
Yeah.
And it's also posted online.
It's posted online. think Ron has some
Now,
follow-up
given
comments.
that, Hope Knight, basically, the ESD commissioner, said that there is a possibility that they may be able to convert units already built to fulfill the requirement to build the 870. Could we use that requirement to maybe correct the imbalance of affordability that exists here?
It certainly seems worth exploring. Obviously, we'd want to hear from the developer, their view on that. And so these are units that are already built but aren't yet occupied.
I have no idea. It doesn't say.
So that is an option that the developer could choose. It is not something that ESD could enforce.
Require.
It's very unlikely that they would choose that course of action.
Well, if you enforce the requirement that they pay the damages, then maybe you will force their hand to consider it.
You mean the penalties under the
That's right, the
settlement? That they would be the idea that we would forbear from that ESD would forbear from enforcing that if they agreed to use.
Tell them you're going to use it, which you should be doing.
Well, we certainly haven't abandoned.
We have not. We have reiterated that that's still our right to do that.
But I think that there's some challenges trying to apply that to the existing buildings, because right now Greenland doesn't, the master developer doesn't really only owns a portion of one of the buildings at this time. So the opportunity for them to make it up is probably might be limited on the properties they own, since it is only a portion of the
And the other
B4
portion
building.
being owned by the EB5?
No, it's Brodsky.
Oh, Brodsky.
The building, they own a portion of the B4 building. I forget I think the address might be 58 6th Avenue, and it's, Norman, what is it? 18 6th Avenue, other direction, right? And so it was known as B4 or Brooklyn Crossing. So that's a joint venture between Brodsky and Greenland USA. But I don't know anything more about that. So they'd only have a partial interest.
Just interrupt for 1 second. Can everyone please raise your voices a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Make sure you're staying close to the table.
I mean, another option would be for the state to consider something like its own version of a Section 8 voucher to try to reduce the cost of some of those units to tenants, but that would require the state subsidizing them directly. I mean, the problem with leverage on the master developer is they don't own anything right now other than the rights to areas that haven't been built. I guess this could bring up the question of Site 5, and has there been any further action or discussion about the future of Site 5 and whether that would be the subject of some modification to the project plan to transfer density over there for development? Has anything further happened with that?
We have met with the lender and developer in the course of regular business about the timeline and action items within the plan. There have no specific plans at this point.
Okay, and you're talking about Site 5, not the rail yard.
I'm talking writ large project.
The whole project. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's so.
It's your idea that somehow a deeper affordability component could be folded into that in exchange for modification of the plan to allow the density to be transferred?
Well, I guess we could sort of move into a type of discussion where we talk about where the future of the project is going. And I think right now, we have a project that is approved, a commercial building at the corner of Flatbush and Atlantic Avenue that likely will never be built. And it is approved, that building's, let's say, 60 stories, and there's an approval for about a 25-story building on the Site 5 lot, which is also a commercial building, and there just isn't very much of a market for that type of commercial space in New York City right now. So it seems unlikely that those would, in the near future, be economical. So I think people who've been watching the project perhaps might expect that if there was to be a modification to the project plan, the density that has been previously approved for those buildings as commercial could be reprogrammed for residential, which there is a market, and that would change the whole balance of units in the project, and potentially offer the ability to address the relative lack of deeply affordable apartments in the project. Certainly possible. Just off the top of my head. As far as the rail yards go, I guess one of the questions I have with respect to the auction that's planned for April 30 is, have there been any bidders qualified by ESD yet to bid in that auction?
No developer has been presented to ESD.
Okay. And there haven't been any there weren't any developers qualified for the earlier auctions before they rescheduled, I imagine.
There's never been anyone presented to us.
Okay. I mean, that might suggest that the project as it's currently constituted, at least that part of the project is not economical. Because if it was, a developer would probably be interested on some level at bidding for those rights. So I guess the next question might be, what's our path from going from here, where we have a project that doesn't seem to be moving forward because of the economics, into a project that accomplishes some of the things we're talking about, like completing the housing and actually addressing the need for deeper affordability in this part of Brooklyn. And it's challenging to see how we get there, because we can schedule another auction, but if we're offering something that isn't marketable, it won't really get us anywhere. And I appreciate the challenge that ESD is in as well, because it's not, I'm not sure how you improve the marketability of an offering like that at auction. There's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. If you don't have a developer, you don't exactly know what it is that you need to offer in order to get a developer. And that trying to solve that problem isn't any easier when the existing master developer is probably looking for some way to exit the project with some return of capital in some way. So all those things are pretty difficult. So what do you think, guys? I mean, how is that going to work?
You framed our issues very well. I think, what we, again, in the very high level conversations with the lender, they do say they're going to present us with somebody. So that is something that we are waiting for. Doesn't really answer your question, but I think that is, at least related to the platform sites, something we're very interested to see. I think the lender has articulated that they're aware of the type of development entity that is necessary to execute that kind of project. But that's all we've heard on that front.
I mean, let me say that a concern I would have in that situation is, you've got a little bit of a Lone Ranger type of a situation here where somebody is, sort of outside of a competitive. What would you do in that case? Let's say, you've got Joe Bag of Donuts over here who comes in and he's a great developer. He's got capacity and can be qualified by ESD, and he says, look, what I really am going to need to do this project is I'm going to need the following set of changes to the terms. And so what happens at that point? Does that then become something that is offered out as how does that become adopted into the project plan And then once it's adopted, is it offered out competitively for other bidders, or does Joe have an inside line on that project?
I think related to our development agreement,
We have the development agreement that's in place now.
Right.
That remains in place. The developer that steps up is subject to that. If they propose something different, then it would be something that we would have to consider in our process. We would come back to this board. We would come back to our board. We would do an environmental review.
that would be larger engagement.
Yeah, so it would be a process of modification if that seemed to be a way forward, but we just don't know at this point.
And then I think maybe your question is about, let's say there's a set of parameters that look different than the project exists or currently looks today. Does that open up to other developers? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, we're kind of recasting the whole, I mean, I agree it's very complicated, but just from, I guess we can look at this and say, look, we've sort of established that we can't market these rights through an auction, and so we're going to go back to the developer and the lender and let them come up with somebody who can propose a way forward. And I guess what I'm hearing is the way that we sort of confirm that works is going through a modification of the general project plan. We do an environmental review. We do a bunch of engagement, and quite frankly, I mean, it still puts the direction of the new project in the hands of the Lone Ranger here, who's my friend Mr. Bag of Donuts, who stepped into that role. I don't think that's ideal, but I understand. At the same time, I understand the limitation of being bound by the existing development agreement.
The need for housing has been established. There is an opportunity to build housing on this site. This agency has oversight over a developer and an agreement that now exists. But what happens when that collapses? Why aren't you preparing an alternative at this point that is proactive, that begins to think through how you would deal with this if the developer is forced to walk away from the deal, or if the developer comes in with an alteration which is unacceptable? I don't see why ESD cannot be proactive in beginning to develop an alternative strategy of how to develop this. I just think you're not living up to the mandate of ESD, and you're not really doing what you should be doing, and that is this coming up with an alternative that might take advantage of a different role for the state or for the city or for another development opportunity that might arise. I raised it earlier, and I think it's incumbent upon you to do it. The mandate that started Empire State Development Corporation was to build housing. The governor has made commitments. It'd be great to have somebody from the governor's office here at a meeting and maybe able to help us out, begin to think of how do we take advantage of this hole in the ground and really begin to use it to heal the division between Prospect Heights and Fort Greene, begin to deal with the blight that you said use as an excuse for taking the property with the developer. I think it's incumbent upon the state not to be sitting back and speechless and basically begin to think about what are the alternatives that you can live with, and how do we really begin to stimulate development here.
I agree with Ron, and I also want to observe that the master agreement that we're kind of yoked to right now is in place because two master developers overpromised. And if we sign a third one might also overpromise. And that strategy hasn't worked very well so far. So that's a big part of the reason that I agree with Ron, that we do have to think through different strategies. The master developer approach hasn't worked. And there are there are some, even though there are limitations in the MDA, there are some tools that it offers that could, could be used to help resolve that situation.
I did have one more item.
Okay.
It was just a title slide. That's why we brought it down so that viewers could see the full group. It was to the question of EB5 loans. We had been asked by the board, again, this is purely informational. We'd been asked by the board about questions around the EB5 loans and their permitted uses. So we do believe, based on invoices and documents from Greenland, that they've shared with our legal counsel, first off, that the total amount of the capital for the rail yard and foundational work at the site exceeded the cost of the loan to begin with. We will say that we don't have a full accounting for the spending of the loans. To the extent that we do, it was for permitted uses. But at this time, we wanted to get back to you, as you did request that.
So how do we account then for the lender apparently having implied to investors that some of the proceeds from the loan were being used for other buildings that weren't part of the collateral?
So when we asked the lender that question, they represented to us that that was all related to jobs reporting. Was a requirement of the EB5 loan financing of reporting on jobs for the entire project, and not just the the permitted uses that the loans themselves were actually financing.
So that they get credit for jobs created for parts of the project that the proceeds weren't used for.
I think that's
okay under EB5.
That's the representation that we received from the lender.
But you're not supposed to provide oversight.
That seems hard to believe that's okay, though.
That's the information that we received from them.
And then not you individually, but it's the entity.
It's not our. I don't think it's our role here to appraise the efficacy of the EB5 program and to try to fill in the holes that exist that allow that kind of slippage and use of data for one purpose and then for another. I mean, especially since job creation is a bit of an alchemy science to begin with. I think the important point here is that we have documentation that funds were actually applied to where they were supposed to be applied.
But the agreement was to provide both affordable housing and jobs, and it was up to this entity to make sure that was what was occurring, no matter how it was financed. Okay, and so that kind of oversight really has to exist, and there was laxity in providing that oversight.
But that's a different kind of oversight than specifically analyzing the compliance with the EB5 program, right?
True. But I just want to stay with the EB5 program for a second. So if in fact proceeds were going to be used and were completely used and even the cost of the rail yard development exceeded the proceeds from the EB5 loans, how in the world was it imagined that the loans were going to get paid off? Because they were being used to pay for something that wasn't going to generate any revenue. What does the lender, what does the lender say to that? Or what do we say to that? What was, construction loan gets paid off with permanent financing because it supports a building that has revenue, but this didn't have any revenue. So how is the loan going to be repaid?
I can't speak to the financial structures at the time that were put forth for the loan.
They assumed they had a solution where when they were actually going to develop housing, there would be proceeds to pay off this loan. my assumption, but I mean,
But ESD would have, I mean, somebody here at the time would have signed off on this financing and collateralizing the development rights, and probably, I would think, would have been interested in what would have happened if there weren't funds available to pay off the loan when it was due. And because that would have clearly led to the exact situation we're in right now. Would it not? I mean, since we're there, I guess we know the answer.
yeah, exactly. And then again, we weren't here at the time.
No, I know, but I just wonder if there's anything, maybe somebody was, maybe there's something in the file that explains what was intended, but I mean, it must have been known for some time that there weren't going to be buildings appearing above the rail yard in time to start generating income that could be used to take out the EB5 investors with some permanent financing.
Yeah, in our search for clarity on this, we did not come across anything.
Right. All right. Okay. So here we are.
Okay. Is there anything further by way of update that we can do now?
Those were the updates. Short of the budget, which we'll take up at the proper
Yeah,
meeting.
well, all right. So are there any comments?
I have one general comment to make, and that is that there are supposedly 14 members of this advisory group, 9 of which are appointed by the governor. And I don't know who in this room is here, except for you, that is appointed by the governor. In essence, the governor, by delegates not coming here, are creating a pocket veto over this group, the inability of this group to function, because we should be having a quorum. And I think the message should go to the governor that if these folks aren't interested in coming, maybe he needs to replace them.
Well, as you may recall, this meeting was originally scheduled to happen last week and then got rescheduled. I don't know who had from that group had been able to attend that meeting, but that weren't able to attend this one. So, and I don't think that all the absent members are gubernatorial appointees either.
I can confirm that.
At one point, we had talked about how to schedule these, and I don't know. I mean, people's lives happen, so I completely respect that. But the ability to try to lock them in, that can help in some way, obviously.
Well, I guess we'll get going on trying to schedule the next one and try to get as many in attendance. I agree. Attendance has been an issue of late. It hasn't always been an issue.
Could I ask how much of the current situation with this project has been communicated to the ESD board and communicated to the governor? I mean, this is a project where everybody understands that we're in a housing crisis, and the governor certainly is very interested in trying to build more housing in New York City right now. And this is a project that has 3,219 units already approved to be built on a site right next to the third largest transit hub in New York City. And is that something the ESD board understands? Does the governor understand it? This is really, I mean, for all of the challenges, it is a site that has a real opportunity to impact the need for housing in New York. It doesn't have to wait on all of these other market forces to sort it out necessarily, and maybe it shouldn't.
I mean, we
could have sort of an informal
to the governor,
response to that.
Whether the governor herself has been made aware, but we certainly speak with our colleagues in the chamber about this project often, weekly, really. So I think they're well aware. And I can't say whether any presentations to my knowledge, nothing has gone to the ESD board about this project in my time here.
Does the board know that the developer is in default of its EB5 financing if there's a foreclosure action on the rights over the rail yards?
So we keep Hope Knight, who's on the board, well,
I'm sure, no, I know she knows. I'm certain of that.
And at other times, the chair of the board.
Okay. Even though, again, this is not a formal meeting, I'd like to make an opportunity available for any public comment. If anyone who's either in attendance in the room or online, if anyone wants to make any comments. Okay. Well, hearing none, I think we've conducted as much business as we can do today, and we'll. What's that? But I appreciate very much the efforts of the staff to put together materials, and we'll work on rescheduling for a date when we can get a quorum in the near future.
Did you send that out?
Yeah. Thank you.
So you can zoom in.
I don't even have to entertain a motion to adjourn since this wasn't a real meeting anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate the discussion.
Thank you.